Hello, this is the Truth Seeker. This video is actually a video that is part of a discussion that Pandirasbox started. When I say discussion, because he did say in his video that this is not really a debate. We're not really debating items. But we are discussing some matters and bringing up some points on alternate viewpoints regarding primarily dating of scripts, in this case the Dead Sea Scrolls, and also the Avestan texts. So I wanted to thank him first off for creating the video, and because for one thing it gets pretty lonely out here on the inner tubes, as we all know that YouTube has become a vast wasteland. But here we are, those of us who would call ourselves intellectuals, blathering on in the void of interwebs, cyberspace. But anyway, I'm not really going to address all of the issues that were brought up, but I did want to just sort of very loosey-goosey kind of a format, just lay out some things. So first thing I wanted to talk about was the concept of the names of God. And he brought this up in regard to Judaism borrowing this concept from paganism. Now, he didn't specifically relay it to the Avesta. I think his ideas about the Avesta are somewhat in line with my own. What he was doing was simply pointing out one of the arguments, which is in regard to this plurality concept of names of God. So he talked about the scripture that says something in regards to God having one name. I don't know which scripture that was, but one of the things I would point out is there's other scriptures that talk about God's name being great, in all the earth. Yeah, I believe it's in Deuteronomy or Exodus. I have to look it up, but just touching on that, the renowned name of God, that God's name would be renowned, that he would be basically known in all of the earth. What I wanted to point out is the concept of a good name. In other words, it's a good reputation. To have a good name amongst your peers, he's made a good name for himself. When you talk about somebody who my glasses are having a glare here. Let's see if I just go like this. Anyway, when Wellhausen, the individual who was responsible for pretty much solidifying the foundations of the documentary hypotheses, when he discussed the name of God, it was in regard to, I believe it was in Exodus chapter 6, the scripture where the Lord says, up until this time, the people, your fathers knew me by the name El Shaddai, but now you know me by my name Yahweh, or that scripture. Anyway, what it is in reference to is not the actual sound of the letters, whatever the sound is, whatever that sound may be. Yahweh, whatever the sound would be. The Lord is not discussing what the actual, glottal, mechanism is of saying the name of God. In other words, God's name is his character. You knew me by the characteristics of El Shaddai. Now I'm revealing myself to you, basically as a covenantal Lord. I'm coming into a covenant with you, with your nation. And so the idea that the Jews did not have this understanding of applying many names to one God prior to, let's say, the Babylonian captivity, I find hard to believe, because it's such a simple concept to have many names for one person, let alone one God. Also, the name God, just the descriptive name God means many different things even today. In one culture it means, God of the creation. In another culture it could mean some higher power. We don't really know what kind of characteristics to assign to that. My point being is that there of course there were names that were similar in other cultures, possibly even the same names. Now that's another contention I have in regard to these 50 names of God. By the way, if you have the reference, you mentioned something about the Talmudic references to the 50 names of God. I would be interested in seeing that, because when it comes to things like these, I'm very nitpicky. I really want to see each name. I want to see what it was in the original language, and then I want to see what the scholars are claiming it is in the Hebrew language, or the Proto-Hebraic language. Because there's a lot of speculation in that regard too. I'll give you one example. For instance, the name Elohim. I believe it's in the Canaanite. That speculation is made that the word Elim, which is I-L-M, and I think that's either from Babylonian or pre-Babylonian clay tablets or something of that nature. But the Elim, that is like speculated by the scholars to be the equal name of the Hebrew name Elohim. Now, I say speculative because what were the vowel sounds in each culture, and were they really considered the same? Was it really considered the same name? And even if it was considered the same, then you get into the the whole notion of, well, it may be the same name, but was it the same God? Or was it the same concept of, let's just say, angels or divine beings, or of that, going down that road. But so yeah, I would be very interested in seeing the 50 names. Nowadays, I haven't been studying as much, but I continue to study. It's a lifetime of pursuit, right? I've been blessed to to be back to work, and so that's been eating up a lot of time. And so I hope to to do things a little more informally, but continue to try to finish off my video series, Who Wrote the Bible, a response to Who Wrote the Bible, 12-part series, and continue to plug away at the Zoroastrian studies as well. But moving on to the next topic, which was mainly the main one, I think, was you were talking about, was linguistics and dating. And so basically, what your point you were making was that, that I was accepting these ideas of, like, well, documentary hypothesis applied basically to the Avesta, wherein the Avesta is broken up into different sections, and different dates are assigned to each section. For instance, the Gothic portions are given the earliest of dates, and then they have the younger Avestan portions, the Yashts, which are dated, somewhere around the Achaemenid period. I would argue, well, I don't want to get into the dating of that, but basically, the idea of the documentary hypothesis, does the same thing to the Torah. Basically breaks the Torah up into sections, and assigns certain portions to different dates, over a period of, hundreds of years. I would say the difference between that and the Avesta is that the Avesta is, over a period of, like, maybe 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, where there's a lot of there's a lot more opportunities there for the different sections to have been, added. Why do I believe there's more opportunities? Well, the scholars pretty much do a good job of pointing those out, and there seems to be a lot of more internal content in the Avesta, whereas, like, the Torah, when you look at the internal content, I feel that the arguments that are made for different schools, such as the Elohist, the Yahwist, the Deuteronomist, I feel those are not, they're still not at a level that they could establish, these different schools. Whereas with the Avesta, we see different cultures, one of the main one being the last great empire of Zoroastrianism, which was the Sassanid period in the 3rd century AD. So, there's a lot more archaeology there, and a lot of other collaborating documents that really lend, more to this idea of archaisms, within the Avesta. The other thing the Avesta has against it regarding the archaisms, that is, when we're talking about texts that people wrote in a certain way, a priestly manner, in order to make them seem like they're older than they really were. You know, kind of like the Book of Mormon being written in like an Elizabethan English, you know, by Joseph Smith, so that it was, you know, sounding more like the Bible. By the way, I'm not against the Mormons. You know, I hate to throw that example out there because I do respect them, and I would go to a Mormon church any day and worship with them side by side. I wouldn't, you know, I can't give, you know, Joseph Smith, you know, his props or anything like that. I wouldn't be able to, you know, to do that. But when it comes to just pure worship of the Lord, you know, very simplistic faith, I would sit next to them any day and worship with them before I would worship with a lot of other Christian denominations. That is to say, you know, in the world to come, we're going to see a lot of people there that we don't expect to see, and I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of Mormons. I expect to see Pandirasbox. Is your name James? I believe your name is James. You said James all the time. I believe I'm going to see James in the world to come. You know, it's not me to judge who's not going to be there. But I know that the Lord is a merciful Lord. So I trust in the Lord's mercy more than I used to. I don't want to get into the topic of hell. But anyway, one of the things, let me just move on because I'm just blathering now. When we talk about the plurality of the Torah, particularly the Genesis account, and the word Elohim, you know, in the beginning, the Lord, you know, said, you know, let us make man in our image. And it's basically using the name Elohim. And in that regard, there's speculation made that the Elohim are angels, and a lot of there is a Jewish viewpoint that the angels were the ones that assisted with the creation, the Lord, with, you know, creating the earth, and that is not a hard concept for me to dismiss. I don't have any problem with believing that the angels were, you know, part of the creative process. One of the things is that a lot of people, when they read about the plurality of God in Genesis, see, I was raised Protestant, and for me, immediately I would use these verses to prove the Trinity. Well, I'm not going to get into the Trinity. Obviously, I believe in a Trinity, but up until this point, you know, I have a little bit more open-mindedness regarding the plurality of the Godhead. In other words, I don't restrict the Lord to just three, okay? And I also don't restrict the Lord to just one, because there is one Lord. Judaism, you know, has always pronounced that the Lord is the only one. Okay, but that doesn't mean that He is one. You know, what I understand about the Hebrew concept of God is that He is. You cannot put a measure on Him. You know, He's incomprehensible, and so to try to put a number on Him and say, you know, He's just one, when in actuality, you know, He is a plurality, an incomprehensible plurality in unity. You know, and this is something that, you know, the Kabbalists, understood is that there were many emanations from the Lord. And one of the things about the angels, well, actually, I should say the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord, in my opinion, was the Lord. Okay. We can get into like semantics about those different things, or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that, yeah, early Christianity believed that the Word, that God's Word was God, and that Word was part of the creative process, and that the Word was personified. But even more than that, the Word pre-existed, in the before the earth was created. And it's my belief that this Word was the angel of the Lord. That this angel of the Lord is in fact the messianic aspect of God. So basically, I don't have a problem with angels being part of the creative process, specifically the angel of the Lord, whom all things were created from. So whether the other angels assisted the angel of the Lord, who knows? Possibly. I don't. What I'm getting at here is that I do not see, that scripture as being in conflict with the idea of the oneness of God, basically. And I don't. Also, in regard to the angels, I talked a little bit about how there's speculation in the scholarly community about the word Elohim in the Canaanite being equal to the Hebrew Elohim. The sons of God, I suppose, is sort of a different concept in the Canaanite culture than it is in the Hebrew culture. I guess that we could have differing views about that, but basically, divine beings, angelic beings, whatever you want to call them, the Lord created them, and it was at the point when He basically demanded that no other gods, were to be worshipped, just Him. So it says in the Psalms, I don't know which psalm it is, but basically one of those psalms is talking about the Elohim, that they will die like mortal men. Okay, so they're obviously not the same as the Lord of creation, the Elohim. And also in that regard, just because they're called with that word, the Elohim, doesn't mean that the word is meaning the same thing in that context as it would when you use the word Elohim for the Lord of creation. So those are all differing viewpoints there. Regarding the Damascus document and the Dead Sea Scrolls, I did a little bit of study on that. I happen to have this book right here, The Dead Sea Scrolls Today, which is sort of an older book. But I did a little reading on that, and it does, it dated the Damascus document from the Dead Sea Scrolls collection to 75 to 50 BC. Okay. The Cairo Geniza collection, not sure when they dated that, but in regarding to the dating to the 9th century, let me just address that. What I'm talking about are the actual manuscripts that are extant. So in other words, the Cairo Geniza manuscripts, the physical documents, are are dated to the 9th century. Okay. Now, paleographically, they can date them earlier to, I think, the 3rd century or 2nd century. But correct me if I'm wrong. Now, the content, if you date something according to the content, so you're looking at 3 different dates there, okay, and you have to take them all into account. So we can't just look at one date and ignore the other. You know, we got to consider that, okay, the actual physical documents, you know, are dated to this period. You know, the lettering, the writing, you know, is dated to an earlier period. And the content of what they're discussing and the events of what they're discussing is maybe collaborated by other documents which date it, you know, or possibly archaeology, which date it, you know, even earlier. So all those things come into play, as you know. And, you know, when we're talking about the Damascus document, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls Damascus document is dated to 75 through 50 BC. Now, I didn't get into like the specifics of, you know, how they dated him, but I'm sure it was, I'm sure that it was by the lettering, or, you know, the paleographic nature of it. But one of the things that I noted was that the 2 documents from both collections is actually different in some respects. And from what I read, the Dead Sea Scrolls Damascus document is actually a longer version, and it orders the material differently. So I believe there was like 4 sections that were interchanged in different ways, and then of course the one in the Cairo Geniza collection didn't have as much content. So there's arguments that can be made on both sides of that. You know, possibly, you know, if you're going to argue that less means that it came first, or if you're going to argue that more means it came first, you know, because there's arguments on both sides of that. Like a lot of that is the same thing with form criticism in the New Testament. You know, people saying that the more content you have means that it was written later because people wanted to add, you know, different doctrinal ideas and that such. But on the flip side of it, you could say that the documents that have more were written prior, and that those people who were writing later maybe didn't like certain ideas and left those out, and that's why theirs are shorter. And then there's always the idea that, well, these sections were lost in the translation, in, you know, certain people who were doing the transcribing, and therefore, you know, they just had to like piece together what they had, you know, that kind of thing. So there's arguments on both sides of that. Now, as far as like actually looking at the actual lettering and like analyzing that, you know, I'm just going to have to trust the paleographical experts on that, because I could probably spend another lifetime, you know, devoting my life to every area of textual studies, you know. But just to, you know, I'm just, you know, throwing out this what I found here. Anyway, so I talked a little bit about the archaisms, you know, and, you know, why I feel, you know, and I don't really, honestly, I don't have the time to go through the Avesta right now and like point out the different sections that, you know, and the reasons why. But there's plenty of content out there to go through. I do, you know, I'd rather spend my time, you know, the rest of my life defending the Torah and dealing with what the skeptics would have to say about archaisms in the Torah. So if there are certain archaisms in the Torah, then I'm always open to anyone who wants to, like, submit those to me, and then I'll, take the time to come up with another viewpoint, come up with another explanation as to why I believe that they're not an archaism or whatever. The dating of the pottery and the coins regarding the Dead Sea Scrolls is another matter, because the pottery was in the very caves that the texts were in, and the majority of the coins were in the Qumran community area, but there were also coins that were in some of the caves as well, and so those also contribute to the dating of the scrolls. And another thing about, like when you're talking about the decay of the scripts, it's like, it's very, I would agree with you, it's very rare to find scripts around that period, just because of the decay. Now, different things decay in different, speeds. I believe, now you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe most of the scrolls were on animal skins. So that might have contributed to their lengthy life. In other words, paper or papyrus being more susceptible to moisture and mold and such, whereas animal skins being a little more rugged, and then some of them like being encapsulated in these jars contributed to their longevity. So scripts being as rare as they are, people would hold on to these collections for, like maybe they would hold on to them for like 100 years, because they're using that to copy off of, and make the newer copies. And, so when they find, a variety of scripts within one cave that, like are dated from, like, let's say 150 BC to somewhere in the 1st century AD, that's why. It's because this area, I guess, was maybe there's a lot of speculation as to why those scripts were there. I would have to agree with you that it has never been proven adequately that the Qumran community used these scripts, and that this was somehow related to the Qumran community, because I think that's another one of those things that just drives me crazy, is when you're only going to get this if you're dealing in the upper echelon of study regarding the Qumran community. But if you're just going to Bible college and getting your doctor of divinity or whatever, you're just going to get the basic summary of Dead Sea Scrolls learning, which is, oh yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls are part of the Qumran community, and but which just drives me crazy. But anyway, yeah, maybe these scripts were like somebody's collection, in Jerusalem, and like prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, they felt like they're going to take this library and just like hide it in a cave, so that these works are not destroyed, So who knows? But at any rate, I would agree with you on the topic regarding the illumination of the gospel texts. One of the things that they say is, okay, well, these scripts were actually older, and then the monks came along and they like drew these designs around them, Well, that's the explanation I've heard most times, is that, oh yeah, well, the painting, you know, is dated later, but the actual documents themselves were much earlier. So I believe that may be the case with some of them, but not all of them. And in regard to that, not all of the, you know, critical texts are illuminated, you know. So I would say, you know, to me that's not a big issue. Now, regarding the linguistics, the linguistic dating of the text, that it being not sufficient in itself, and I would also have to agree with this. I would say, though, that the scholars who study the Avesta actually lean quite heavily on linguistic dating. I would say more so than those who are dating the Torah. I think the Torah is dated more on the content, you know, and its collaboration with archaeology, as well as with linguistics. See, it's all collaborating together there. So the problem with the Avesta is trying to find, you know, concrete archaeological content that is, you know, going to collaborate the texts. And so, you know, even though they're dating, like, let's say the younger Avestan texts to, like, maybe the Achaemenid period, well, you know, there's no kings listed in the Avesta from the Achaemenid period, you know, and you know, so that's why they have to speculate that certain names that are given in the Avesta are somehow equal to certain names of some of the Achaemenid kings. But you know, it's a little bit of a stretch, and it's kind of hard to piece all that together, as you know, the whole Persian Empire, a period during that time is sort of a dark period. Like, we don't have a lot of knowledge of all of it. But in my opinion, I feel like the Jewish scriptures shed a lot more light in that area. So now carbon dating, I would also have to agree with you on that. I think that carbon dating is just another tool, you know, to add to the mix, you know, because honestly, you date something with carbon dating and you're going to get a plus or minus of, like, maybe hundreds of years at a time. So that, you know, kind of just, like, gets you in the ballpark. You know, like, it's around that area. You know, but I think that content is one of the big things for me. I think the content of, you know, what is in the texts. You mentioned you were talking about Marcus Aurelius, you know, dating his texts, and I was just thinking, well, you know, that's the same thing, you know, as far as the Jewish scriptures are concerned. You know, there is content within the Torah that you know, collaborates with archaeology, and there, you know, and then moving beyond that, you know, in some of the prophetic books, Hosea, Zechariah, Obadiah, Isaiah, you know, they all list, like, maybe certain kings, you know, you know, so that kind of gives us an idea of when to date those documents. And then, of course, there's all this speculation of, like, well, okay, maybe the parts of it were dated then, and then additions were what occurred later on. But that's all unprovable. I mean, you have to take everything into account, and then it takes a lifetime of study. I've been studying these things for probably as long as you've been studying your pursuits, and I think you can agree that it's an intuitive thing. You just come down to your intuition after you've absorbed it all, and you're like, I think most of the evidence is leaning in this direction. But to catalog it, very few men in history have sat down and written great works, encyclopedias of reasons why they believe, and those are like lifetimes of work, 10 years plus in the making. I'll be the first to admit that maybe I don't have what it takes to do something like that, but it would be a great accomplishment. I would love to undertake if I could. But moving on, so basically you were saying that you felt that the documentary hypothesis regarding the Torah is pretty much the same as the scholarship as being applied to the Avesta, and so then you said that basically the Torah is just pretty much on as shaky ground as the Avesta is. Well, that's where I would have to disagree, because we get back into the dating, okay? Well, the dating of the texts, the actual manuscript documents of the Avesta, are like, after the medieval period. The extant copies, we're talking like after 1300 AD. So, basically, we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and even if you're going to date them, like, I'm just going to be, I'll just go ahead and, like, say, okay, well, what if they are dated to, like, let's say, the first, the 2nd century or 3rd century. Let's say, what if they are dated to that period? Then they're still way earlier than the text of the Avesta. But in my opinion, they're dated. The whole collection is dated somewhere between 200 BC. I'll say 150 BC to the first to the 1st century AD. And we certainly can't just dismiss the whole collection of the Dead Sea Scrolls based on one document, that is the Damascus document. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the only document in the Cairo-Geniza collection that was in the Dead Sea Scroll collection. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, yeah. I mean, what I'm talking about is primarily when I'm talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm talking about the Book of Enoch, and the angels, the 7 angels in there, and then how Zoroastrianism, kind of takes this concept on later on, and like the 3rd century Sassanid period. Prior to that, the Avesta just had this basic concept of like 7 spirits, and it doesn't even use the number 7. It just lists them out, and so scholars were like, oh, there's 7 of these, so that must be equal to the 7 angels in Judaism. So that's kind of a speculation. So moving on to the uncertainties that Judaism influenced Zoroastrianism, or that Zoroastrianism influenced Judaism. And yes, I would have to agree with you too. Yeah. I have always stated from the beginning that it is a belief of mine, okay, that Judaism influenced Zoroastrianism. And that is because, okay, I'm not saying that it influenced Zoroastrianism in like massive, amounts, but I would have to say that based on the Zoroastrianism of the Sassanid period, which is the 3rd century AD, that's like the latest form of the religion of Zoroastrianism, which, is basically dated after the time of Christianity, and Christianity, of course, is, a direct offshoot of Judaism. So everything that's in Christianity is in Judaism. So that can be argued, but that's another video. But basically, what I'm saying is that those ideas like angels, demons, hell, heaven, monotheism, okay, those were all crystallized, after the time of Christianity within Zoroastrianism. And especially monotheism, because when Islam, what is that, around like 600 or 800 AD, when that comes on the scene, it really forces Zoroastrianism to take on more of these monotheistic ideas. Okay, but if you read the text of the Avesta, and I'm almost through the old Pahlavi texts, but this is like reading and reading and reading and reading. But if you read those texts just as they are, and you don't divide them up, and you don't say, okay, these are older and these are younger texts of the Avesta. If you just take them as a whole, then you have to say, okay, Zoroaster was a polytheist. Okay, basically that's what you come to, and unless you're going to believe like, oh well, they're just assigning these texts to Zoroaster, because basically, after I've read some of the Yashts, I come to the conclusion that, well, maybe some of these Yashts, this is my own, and not just mine, but some of the authors that are translating these texts. You can download them from Amazon.com on your Kindle. They're available. But some of the authors are like, yeah, you know what? Some of these Yashts are probably earlier than the Gathas, because they're so polytheistic. So there's just all kinds of speculation about the texts, and yeah, I think that there are a lot of universal ideas within Judaism and Zoroastrianism that could just be they came to those ideas on their own. But I think there are some certain things to be said about the crystallization of those ideas, and like the how they evolved even more after the time of Christianity and with the advent of Islam. So in that sense is what I say. Judaism did influence Zoroastrianism. That's what I'm saying. And yes, I am also saying that I believe that Judaism was monotheistic prior to the time of the Babylonian captivity, and so that's sort of my argument. Is that when I say Judaism influenced Zoroastrianism, it's kind of like saying Zoroastrianism did not influence Judaism. Or I could say Judaism did not influence Zoroastrianism in the way that that people are claiming that I'm saying it is. But in other words, so much infused from Judaism, but these things are like borrowed from cultures, like very, like not really thinking about it. It's just sort of kind of infused, like just by the influence of the culture around you. What's the word for that? It's like osmosis, or where you're like subconsciously, yeah, you're subconsciously taking on certain ideas, but then over a period of a century, a whole culture will suddenly begin to crystallize an idea of monotheism that seems to be like very similar to Christianity and Judaism. So I think I've talked quite a bit, and maybe a little too much. So again, James, thank you for your video, and I look forward to my next video. God bless everyone, and let us all keep seeking truth, because as long as we're seeking truth, we have the truth. But as soon as you stop seeking truth, you lose it, because truth is something that is always beyond our grasp. It is always something that is moving. So, yeah. All right. God bless everyone.